The sharp slap of winter wind against the clapboard siding rattled the bones of the small homestead. Winter in Colorado, 1876, had no mercy, especially for a widow like Eliza Hartman and her feverish child wrapped in the last remaining blanket. Eliza's fingers trembled as they ran through her honey-gold hair, once a source of pride, now her final lifeline. That hair had seen spring dances, wedding nights, and the laughter of happier days. Today, it might buy a crust of bread, or at least, that was her desperate hope. "Stay warm, my love. I'll be back soon," she whispered, kissing her 4-year-old son Samuel on his burning forehead. His small body curled tighter under the worn-out quilt as Eliza wrapped herself in a tattered shawl and stepped out into the snow. The 7-mile trek to Greystone was punishing. Snow swallowed her worn boots. Wind slashed at her cheeks. Her breath fogged in the biting January air. It had been 6 months since her husband, Jonah, succumbed to consumption. Since then, she had sold everything: furniture, livestock, even Jonah's tools, piece by piece, clinging to survival. All that remained was this cabin. And her hair. By the time she reached Miller's General Store, her cheeks were raw and her lips split from the cold. As she stepped inside, the warmth made her legs buckle slightly. Mr. Miller, the shopkeeper, looked up from behind the counter with that familiar mix of pity and fatigue. "Eliza," he said with a nod, I can't extend any more credit." "I don't want credit," she said, voice shaking. "I need bread and medicine. Samuel hasn't broken his fever in days." Miller sighed deeply, avoiding her gaze. Eliza reached into her shawl and pulled out the thick braid she had cut that morning, nearly 3 feet long, tied carefully with leather cord. "I heard wig makers pay well. Take this, please." Before Miller could reply, a deep voice cut through the stillness. "How much for all of it?" Eliza turned sharply. A tall man stepped out from between the shelves. Dark coat, dust-covered boots, a revolver at his hip, and eyes like storm clouds before a downpour. Caleb Monroe. She had seen him around, known only by name, a quiet rancher with land 5 miles west. They had never spoken. Until now. 40 cents for 2 loaves. $1.20 for the medicine. Mr. Miller murmured, eyes still flicking between Eliza and the stranger. Caleb Monroe reached into his coat and placed silver coins on the counter. "Add flour, coffee, and some dried beef. She'll need it." Eliza stiffened. "I don't accept charity." His gaze met hers, firm but not unkind. "It's not charity, it's a job offer." She blinked. "A job? I need a cook for the winter. My last one left to chase gold up in the mountains. I can provide food, medicine, and shelter for you and your boy. If you accept, you'll come work for me, 5 miles west Monroe Ranch." She looked at him skeptically, her fingers still gripping the braid like armor. "You know I have a child?" "I do." His voice softened, dropping just above a whisper. "Keep your hair, Mrs. Hartman. I'll feed you both." The two off. The wagon ride home was wrapped in silence. Eliza kept her eyes ahead, hands tightly knotted in her lap. Yet every so often, she stole glances at the man beside her. Caleb was steady, unhurried. His profile against the pale sky was framed by the wide brim of his hat and the occasional glint of leather on his coat. His presence didn't feel dangerous. It felt solid. After a while, he spoke. "My mother was widowed when I was 6. No one helped her. She cut her hair 3 times before she couldn't anymore. That braid meant everything. Just like yours does." "Nah." His hands tightened around the reins, voice low and grave. Eliza swallowed. That pain shared across time and memory bound them in a way that words didn't need to explain. That bow. For the next 3 days, Caleb came without fail at dawn and dusk, bringing more food, firewood, and herbs for Samuel's fever. He showed her how to mix the powder into honey water, how to ease a cough without over-medicating. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she watched Samuel breathe evenly for the first time in days. "Thank you," she whispered to Caleb as he packed up the empty medicine pouch. He gave her a half nod. "You'll repay me with good cooking. When he's strong enough, I'll come get you." Reader. 2 weeks later, Eliza and Samuel arrived at Monroe Ranch. The cabin behind the main house was small but clean. The work was constant, feeding 6 ranch hands and a man who seemed to work from sunrise to stars. But the routine brought comfort, predictability, safety. Samuel took to ranch life like a duck to water. He followed Caleb around the barn, asking endless questions. Why do horses sleep standing up? So wolves can't sneak up on them, Caleb replied with a straight face, as though addressing a fellow rancher. Eliza, watching from the porch, felt a warmth stir inside her. Maybe this wasn't just shelter. Maybe it was the beginning of something she had never dared to hope for. Winter blanketed the land with snow and silence, locking emotions deep beneath layers of frost. Days at Monroe Ranch passed in steady rhythm: meals at dawn, chores until dusk, and the crackle of the fire each evening. Eliza adapted quickly, mastering the stove, patching torn shirts, and preserving what little joy she could for Samuel. Caleb, meanwhile, remained a quiet presence, constant, capable, kind. He spoke little, but when he did, it carried weight. Yet what said the most were his eyes. They watched her with a focus that never wandered. They saw her not just as a cook, not as a widow, but as a woman rebuilding herself one breath at a time. One afternoon, while kneading dough, Eliza heard boots on the porch. Caleb entered, brushing snow off his shoulders, damp curls clinging to his neck. "Smells like home in here," he said, reaching for the coffee pot. "Beef stew. Should be ready soon," she replied, not daring to look up. He leaned against the counter, then reached into his coat. "The men are heading into town tomorrow. Thought maybe you and Samuel might want to go. Stock up on anything you need." She blinked. "I wasn't expecting that." He placed an envelope on the counter. "Your wages. For the past few months." Eliza hesitated. "I thought room and board was the arrangement. You work harder than any cook I've had. You've earned every cent." His voice was matter of fact, but there was something tender in the way he said it. As she reached for the envelope, their fingers brushed. A current sparked, subtle but undeniable. Their eyes met. Then, as if on cue, Samuel burst through the door, holding wildflowers in his fist. "Look what I found, Mama. Mr. Caleb. They're for you too." The moment shattered but not forgotten. 1. The next day, while Samuel tried on boots in town, Eliza slipped into the barber shop. "If I were to sell my hair," she asked softly, "what would you offer?" The barber stared at her. "That's a mighty fine mane. $5 more than fair. But why would you?" "Just curious," she said quickly. She stepped outside and nearly walked straight into Caleb. He steadied her. "Everything all right?" "Fine, just making inquiries." His jaw tensed. "About your hair?" She met his eyes squarely. "It's mine to sell." His face darkened, but he said nothing, just turned away. Loaf it. That night, back at the ranch, Samuel sat on his cot, watching his mother. "Are we leaving?" Eliza froze. "Why do you ask that?" He shrugged. "You and Mr. Caleb aren't smiling as much. I don't want to go. I think he needs us." Her breath caught. "Why do you think that?" "Because he looks sad when you're not looking. Just like Papa used to, when he looked at your picture." Eliza turned away, her heart a storm. Sometimes, children see what adults are too afraid to admit. 3 days later, Caleb left the ranch to negotiate a cattle purchase with a neighbor. When Eliza awoke to find the fire unlit and the house unusually still, she spotted a folded note on the table. "Back by Tuesday, watch for the wind, CM." She read it twice, then folded it carefully, placing it next to her coffee mug like something sacred. Without him, the ranch felt different, hollow. She went about her day cooking, cleaning, managing the men, but in the evenings, she found herself on the porch, gazing toward the horizon, searching for a silhouette she wouldn't admit she missed. On the 4th day, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed the windows. Wind howled like a wounded beast. While Eliza served stew to the ranch hands in the main house, the front door slammed open. Caleb stumbled in, soaked, mud on his boots, water dripping from his hat. Hank, the foreman, stood up. "Boss, didn't expect you in this weather." "No point waiting it out when home's just a ride away," Caleb said, eyes already scanning the room, stopping when they found hers. WW. Later that night, Eliza brought a fresh pot of coffee to the kitchen. Caleb sat near the fire, hair damp, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "You'll catch a fever if you stay like that," she scolded gently. He took the mug with a grateful nod. "I've weathered worse." She hesitated, then sat across from him. "About the other day," she began. "I had no right to question your choices," he interrupted. "No, you didn't," she said, softly but firmly. "But I appreciated it, even if I didn't say so." He ran a hand through his hair, then looked at her directly. "Are you planning to leave?" The question was like a sudden gust, unexpected but impossible to ignore. "I don't know," she admitted. "Samuel loves it here. The work is steady. But it's not your home," he finished for her. Eliza nodded. "I still have my land. My old house. I need to decide, restore it, or sell it." There was a pause. Then Caleb's voice came low, almost hesitant. "What if there was a third option?" Her heart skipped. "What kind of option?" "To stay," he said. "Not as a cook." He struggled for the words. "As what, Caleb?" she whispered. He met her gaze, and in his eyes was something raw, something real. "As my wife, if you'd have me." "That's see." The world narrowed to the space between them. "Your wife?" she breathed. "I know it's sudden," he said. "And I know you're still grieving Jonah. But these months, Eliza, watching you fight for Samuel, rebuild piece by piece, I've never met anyone like you." Tears pricked at her eyes. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you almost sold your hair to feed your child. I know you work from sunup to sundown. And I know that when you laugh, this place doesn't feel so lonely." Her lips trembled. "I didn't think. I never imagined." He reached out, covering her hand with his. "Neither did I. But here we are." She stared at their joined hands. "I need time, Caleb. It's a lot." He nodded. "Take all the time you need. My feelings won't change." That night, Eliza lay awake, one arm curled around her sleeping son. Caleb wanted to marry her. The thought made her heart race then ache. Jonah had only been gone a year. Was it betrayal to consider another man? Yet, wasn't surviving about choosing to live, not just to endure? The next morning, Eliza rose early, far before sunrise. She braided her long golden hair with care, pinning it up neatly. Something in her heart had shifted, fragile yet certain. Samuel, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, looked at her with curiosity. "You look fancy, Mama. Are we going somewhere?" She smiled softly. "Not today. But I need to talk to Mr. Caleb. Can you stay with Miss Maria for a bit?" Samuel nodded seriously. "Are you going to tell him we're staying?" She stopped in her tracks. "Why would you think that?" "Because," he shrugged with that too wise for his age look, "you smile different when he's around. Like you used to with Papa." Eliza swallowed hard. "You little rascal," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. "You see far too much." U.D. She found Caleb in the barn, tending to a horse's sore leg. He stood up quickly when he saw her, brushing his hands on his jeans, like a boy caught skipping chores. "Eliza." "Caleb." Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them tightly together. "I've been thinking about your proposal." He didn't speak, just watched her with quiet patience. "I need to ask you something first." He waited. "Are you asking me out of responsibility?" she said carefully. "Do you feel obligated, because of how we met? Because of Samuel?" His eyes widened. "Is that what you think?" "I need to be sure," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You met me at my lowest. I don't want your pity." "Pity?" His voice dropped, full of disbelief. He stepped closer. "Eliza, what I feel for you is the furthest thing from pity." She stared at him. "Then what is it?" Instead of answering, Caleb reached up slowly, deliberately cradling her face as though she were made of porcelain. If she had pulled away, he would have stopped. But she didn't. Their lips met, hesitant at first, like a question. But when her hands moved to his chest, not to push him away but to steady herself, the kiss deepened. It wasn't fiery or rushed. It was full of warmth, longing, and something far older than both of them. The ache of two souls who had waited longer than they knew. When they finally pulled apart, breath mingling in the quiet barn, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. That, he whispered, is what I feel. Eliza's voice trembled. I'm scared. Of what? Of losing again. Of letting Samuel grow attached. Then, she couldn't finish. Caleb pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. I can't promise I'll never get hurt, Eliza. No man can. But I can promise this: I'll love you both with everything I have, for however long I get. Tears slid down her cheeks. I think I'm falling in love with you, Caleb Monroe. His smile, real, open, beautiful, broke across his face. I already fell, Eliza Hartman. No T-sex. Dud Grav. 2 weeks later, they married in Greystone's small white church. Samuel, donning a little suit, served as the proudest flower boy in town. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Caleb didn't wait. He swept Eliza into his arms, lips brushing hers with reverence. Later that night, he handed her a small wooden box. Inside, a silver-handled hairbrush and a matching mirror. To remind you, he murmured, that your hair is not something you should ever have to give up. And neither are you. Eliza pressed her lips to his. Show me, she whispered. And in that quiet bedroom, two people who had once lost everything, found everything they needed in each other. Spring crept in like a gentle promise. Snow melted into trickling streams, buds peeked from trees, and green stretched across the valley once more. At Monroe Ranch, now more affectionately known as Twin Oaks, life settled into a new kind of rhythm. Eliza thrived in her new role. No longer just the cook or caretaker, she was now co-owner, co-dreamer, and co-builder of a future she once thought impossible. She used the money from selling her old homestead to expand their ranch operations. More cattle, better fencing, a vegetable garden larger than any she'd tended before. Caleb handled the animals. Eliza handled the accounts. Between them, they formed a partnership rooted in respect and built on love. You've got more head for business than I ever will, Caleb joked one evening as she sat tallying expenses in the logbook. You've got more muscle than I ever want, she quipped back. He grinned. Perfect match then. Away. Samuel flourished too. At 8, he had grown into a curious, kind-hearted boy. He rode ponies like a natural, and asked the ranch hands more questions than they could keep up with. But his favorite person was still Caleb. To everyone's quiet delight, Samuel had started calling him Pa without prompting. And Caleb, he didn't just wear that title. He cherished it. Grad. One early June evening, after dinner was cleared and Samuel had run off to chase fireflies, Eliza placed Caleb's hand gently over her belly. His brow furrowed. What's? Her smile answered before she could say the words. 6 weeks. His jaw slackened, eyes wide. Then he let out a breathless laugh and wrapped her in his arms, spinning her in the kitchen. Eliza, that's the best damn news I've ever heard. I thought so, she whispered into his neck. Well, the baby, Jessie Monroe, arrived the following winter, rosy-cheeked and loud-lunged. Samuel declared himself the official big brother and took to reading Jessie bedtime stories about brave cowboys and golden-haired princesses. Caleb built a new crib. Eliza sewed tiny shirts from scraps. The ranch, already full of life, grew fuller still. One crisp autumn night, they sat on the porch swing after the boys had been tucked in. Do you ever think, Caleb asked, staring at the stars, about the day we met? Eliza smiled, lacing her fingers through his. I think about it often. I thought I was just helping someone through a rough season. Didn't realize I was finding my family. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. And I thought I was losing the last thing I had, my hair. But really, I was gaining everything I needed. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in quiet mornings and soft good nights. In a child's giggle. In a kitchen filled with the smell of stew. In a man who says, keep your hair, I'll feed you both. Time passed like the wind on the open plains, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always moving forward. For Eliza and Caleb, each season laid another brick in the foundation of their shared life. The Twin Oaks Ranch gained a quiet reputation not just for strong cattle and good horses, but for something rarer. A family built from resilience, respect, and deep, unwavering affection. Samuel, now 8, had developed a storyteller's spirit. He would sit on the porch and regale new ranch hands with tales of the time Mama almost sold her hair for bread. Caleb always chuckled from the doorway, and Eliza rolled her eyes but never stopped smiling. Jesse, the younger of the two boys, had grown into a firecracker of energy and curiosity. He loved animals, dirt, and climbing things he probably shouldn't. One afternoon, he hugged his mama tightly and proclaimed, "You're pretty like a white horse, Mama." The whole house laughed for 5 minutes straight. One autumn evening, Eliza sat before the mirror, brushing her long golden hair as she did every night. The strands glowed under the lamplight, untamed and beautiful. Caleb entered quietly, watching her from the doorway. "I still remember the day you nearly cut it," he said, stepping behind her. "I swear, my heart broke a little." "And you stopped me," she said, smiling at his reflection. "I had to. That hair, it was never meant to be traded for survival." She set down the brush and stood to face him. "You didn't just save my hair, Caleb. You saved everything I was about to give up on." 2. Later that evening, with the boys asleep and the wind whispering against the windows, they sat on the porch swing once more like they had so many times before. "I think back to that day in the store," Eliza murmured. "I had nothing, no money, no plan, just a braid in my hand and desperation in my heart. And I think," Caleb said, squeezing her hand, "how close I came to walking out of that store without saying a word." She looked at him. "But you didn't." He smiled. "No. Because I saw a woman worth everything. Worth fighting for. Worth building a home with." Sometimes, happy endings don't come in grand gestures. They arrive in small things. A warm meal, a hand to hold, a child's laughter echoing through wooden walls. They come in the quiet confidence of a man who once said, "Keep your hair, I'll feed you both," and meant every word.